When humanity told the galactic overlords we're done playing by your rules, no one expected half the galaxy to follow them out the door. The crystalline spires of the Galactic Council chambers stretched impossibly high above the assembled delegates, their surfaces refracting the light of a dozen different suns. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the human delegation's podium, her dark eyes scanning the sea of alien faces that surrounded her in the amphitheater-style chamber. Some were familiar after 3 years of negotiations. The insectoid Zephyrians with their compound eyes glittering like jewels, the gaseous ethereals contained within their environmental suits, the proud Draconian Empire representatives with their scaled hides and predatory grins. But today, something was different today. The usual diplomatic facade was cracking. The motion before us, droned High Counselor Vexthul, his forearms gesturing with practiced authority, is to limit human expansion to their current 17 systems, with mandatory oversight from the Galactic Peacekeeping Force for any future colonization attempts. His voice carried the weight of assumed superiority that had grated on Chen's nerves for months. Ambassador Chen felt the familiar burn of indignation rise in her chest. 17 systems. Out of the millions that comprise the galaxy, they wanted to cage humanity in 17 systems. She glanced at her aide, Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, whose jaw was clenched so tight she could hear his teeth grinding. The ethereal delegate, speaking through its translator box in a voice like wind chimes, added insult to injury. Humans have shown alarming aggression in their expansion patterns. Their tendency toward violence and territorial acquisition threatens the established order we have maintained for millennia. Violence. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Chen thought of the human colonies that had been established, through careful negotiation and hard work, of the families who had risked everything to build new lives among the stars. She thought of the 23 conflicts humanity had helped resolve through diplomatic intervention since joining the Council, and the humanitarian aid missions that had saved billions of lives across dozens of species. Furthermore, continued the Zephyrian delegate, its mandibles clicking with each word, human technological advancement occurs at an unsustainable pace. Their refusal to share certain military technologies with the collective is a clear violation of the cooperation accords. The audacity was breathtaking. They wanted humanity's innovations, the breakthrough faster-than-light drives, the revolutionary medical technologies, the defensive systems that had proven so effective. But they wanted to control who could use them, and how Ambassador Chen stood slowly, her movement causing a ripple of attention throughout the chamber. The conversations died to whispers, then to complete silence. Even the ever-present hum of the translation system seemed to quiet in anticipation honored delegates. She began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. I have listened to your concerns with the patience and respect that 3 years of diplomatic service has taught me, but I find myself wondering if that patience has been mistaken for weakness. A murmur ran through the assembly. The Draconian delegates' pupils dilated with interest. Their species appreciated directness, even if they didn't respect it from lesser beings. You speak of human aggression, Chen continued, her tone measured but gaining strength. Yet in the past solar year alone, it was human intervention that prevented the Cygnus genocide. It was human medical technology that stopped the plague sweeping through the Outer Rim. It was human negotiators who brokered peace between the Stellar Confederacy and the Free Worlds Alliance, ending a war that had raged for decades. The silence was deafening now. Chen could feel the weight of thousands of eyes upon her, some alien, some recognizably hostile, others merely curious. You want to limit us to 17 systems while the Draconian Empire spans 300. You demand our technologies while refusing to share your own. You question our expansion while the ethereal collective continues to consume entire nebulae for resources. Her voice was rising now, 3 years of frustration and diplomatic double talk finally boiling over. And now you have the audacity to suggest that we submit to oversight, that humanity, which has never broken a treaty, never initiated an aggressive action, never failed to honor its commitments to this council, should bow to supervision like wayward children. High Counselor Vexthul's tentacles writhed in agitation, Ambassador Chen, you will moderate your tone. This council has governed galactic civilization for over 10,000 years. This council, Chen interrupted, her voice cutting through his protest like a blade, has grown fat and complacent on 10,000 years of stagnation. When was the last breakthrough in faster-than-light travel before humanity joined? When was the last medical advance that actually saved lives instead of simply prolonging suffering? When was the last time this council did anything besides maintain the status quo and protect the interests of its most powerful members? The chamber, erupted delegates were on their feet, or their equivalent, shouting, chittering, humming, and roaring in a dozen different languages. The translation systems, overwhelmed by the chaos, began to emit discordant electronic squeals. Through the I-2 din, Chen's voice rose clear and strong. Humanity withdraws from these negotiations. We withdraw from the proposed expansion limitation treaty, and we formally request a review of our membership in this council. The silence that followed was absolute. In the aftermath of Ambassador Chen's bombshell announcement, the Galactic Council chambers had descended into barely controlled chaos. Emergency sessions were called, committees formed and dissolved within hours, and the normally sedate political machinery of galactic governance ground to a stuttering halt. Admiral Reyes sat in the observation deck of the UES Defiant, humanity's flagship and the pride of the United Earth Space Navy, watching the massive council station through the reinforced viewport. The station, a marvel of engineering that housed representatives from over 300 species, seemed smaller, somehow from this distance less imposing. "Admiral," came the voice of Commander Park from the bridge, "we're receiving priority communications from 17 different council delegations. They all want immediate meetings with Ambassador Chen." Reyes smiled grimly. "I bet they do." What's our ambassador's response? "She's unavailable for the next 72 hours, sir. Previous commitments." Previous commitments. Chen was actually in her quarters, working with the legal team to draft humanity's formal response to what was sure to be an avalanche of diplomatic pressure. "But the aliens didn't need to know that, sir." Another voice crackled through the comm system. "Captain Morrison of the UES Vanguard reports that 3 Draconian heavy cruisers have taken up positions near the jump point. They're not making any aggressive moves, but they're definitely watching." "Of course they are," Reyes muttered. "The Draconians were predators by nature and evolution. They respected strength and despised weakness. Humanity's sudden show of backbone would have caught their attention immediately." The Admiral turned his attention to the data pad in his hands, scrolling through the initial intelligence reports his analysts had compiled. The numbers told a story that most of the council delegates probably didn't want to acknowledge. In the 3 years since humanity had joined the Galactic Council, human colonies had become the preferred destinations for refugees from conflicts throughout the galaxy. Not because of any formal refugee program, but because human worlds actually worked. Crime was low, infrastructure was maintained, and there was something approaching actual justice in the court systems. More telling were the trade figures. Despite being limited to 17 systems, humanity had become the 4th largest economy in the galaxy. Human manufactured goods were prized for their reliability and innovation. Human agricultural products were considered luxury items on dozens of worlds, and human technological patents were being licensed by virtually every major corporation in known space. The Galactic Council needed humanity far more than humanity needed the Council. "Admiral," Commander Park's voice interrupted his thoughts. "We've got an incoming message from the Stellar Confederacy Priority Alpha." Reyes raised an eyebrow. The Stellar Confederacy was one of the Council's more independent-minded member states, a loose alliance of systems that had always chafed under the bureaucratic restrictions of the central government. "Put it through to my ready room," he ordered. Minutes later, Reyes found himself face-to-face with Admiral Kethvar, the Confederacy's military commander and a being he'd grown to respect during their joint operations in the Outer Rim conflicts. "Admiral Reyes." Kethvar's translated voice carried an undertone of something that might have been amusement. "It seems your people have finally grown tired of the Council's games." "I wouldn't put it quite that way, Admiral," Reyes replied diplomatically, "but Ambassador Chen has made our position clear. Indeed, she has clear enough that half the Council is in emergency session. and the other half is trying to figure out how to salvage the situation without losing face. Kethvar's species didn't smile exactly, but there was definitely approval in his posture. I'm calling to inform you that the Confederacy is prepared to offer alternative arrangements for trade and mutual defense, should humanity decide that Council membership is no longer in your best interests. There it was. The first crack in the Council's united front. If the Stellar Confederacy was willing to break ranks and deal directly with humanity, how many others would follow? That's a generous offer, Admiral. I'll make sure Ambassador Chen is informed. See that you do, and Admiral. Kethvar leaned forward slightly. Tell your ambassador that her speech yesterday is already being broadcast on independent networks. Throughout Confederacy space, the reactions have been interesting. The connection ended, leaving Reyes alone with his thoughts. He pulled up the communications logs and wasn't surprised to see that similar overtures were coming in from nearly 24 smaller systems and independent worlds. The Free Traders Union had already offered to honor all existing contracts regardless of Council sanctions. 3 different mining consortiums were proposing exclusive deals with human manufacturers. The Council's threat to isolate humanity was backfiring spectacularly. His contemplation was interrupted by an urgent chime from his personal communicator. Admiral Reyes activated the device to find Ambassador Chen's face on the screen, looking tired but determined. Admiral, I need a full strategic assessment of our position. Legal, military, economic, everything. Already in progress, Ambassador. But I can give you the preliminary assessment right now. We hold all the cards. Chen's expression shifted to one of cautious optimism. Explain. Simply put, the Council needs us more than we need them. Our colonies are economic powerhouses. Our technology is generations ahead of anything else in the galaxy. And our military, while small, is the most advanced force in known space. More importantly, we've never given anyone a reason to distrust us. Reyes pulled up a holographic display showing the current political situation. Red zones marked Council loyalist systems, blue showed human influence, and green indicated neutral or independent systems. Look at this, Ambassador 17 systems under direct human control, but over 200 systems have significant human populations, human technology, or human economic partnerships. The Council can't isolate us without devastating their own economy. Chen studied the display intently. What about militarily? That's where things get interesting. On paper, the Council has overwhelming numerical superiority. In practice, Reyes manipulated the display to show fleet compositions and capabilities. Our ships are faster, better armed, and more advanced than anything else in space. The Draconians have the largest fleet, but their technology is essentially unchanged. For centuries, the Ethereals have impressive numbers, but their ships are fragile. The Zephyrians are fast but lightly armed. You're saying we could actually fight the entire Council if necessary? I'm saying we wouldn't have to look at the logistics alone. Coordinating military action between 300 species with different technologies, different strategic doctrines, and half of them actively disliking each other. It would be a nightmare. Meanwhile, every human ship is equipped with our latest FTL drives, our point defense systems, and our quantum communication networks. We could outrun anything we couldn't outfight and coordinate our actions in real time, across the entire galaxy. Chen was quiet for a long moment, absorbing the implications. Admiral, I want you to begin discreet preparations for total withdrawal from Council jurisdiction. Nothing overt, but make sure we're ready to go fully independent. If necessary, already begun, Ambassador. And there's something else you should know. We're not going to be alone. Reyes shared the intelligence about the Stellar Confederacy's offer and the growing list of systems expressing interest in alternative arrangements. It seems, he concluded, that humanity's little diplomatic tantrum has started something much larger. Half the galaxy is apparently tired of the Council's heavy-handed bureaucracy. For the first time in months, Ambassador Chen smiled. Not the diplomatic smile she wore in negotiations, but a genuine expression of satisfaction. Then perhaps it's time we showed them what the alternative looks like. The UES Defiance main conference room had been transformed into a center of galactic diplomacy, but not the kind the Council was used to. Instead of the formal hierarchical structure of traditional negotiations, representatives from dozens of systems sat around a series of connected tables in what humans called a round-table discussion. The symbolism was intentional. No head table, no elevated positions, no protocol designating who spoke. When Ambassador Chen stood at the center of the arrangement, but her position was functional rather than ceremonial. She was there to facilitate, not to dominate ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings, she began, her voice carrying easily through the room's excellent acoustics. Thank you for accepting our invitation to discuss alternatives to the current galactic political structure. I want to be clear from the outset. Humanity is not seeking to replace the Council's hegemony with our own. We're proposing something entirely different. The assembled delegates represented a fascinating cross-section of galactic civilization. Admiral Kethvar of the Stellar Confederacy sat beside Ambassador Zilthra from the Free Worlds Alliance, representatives from mining, colonies, agricultural worlds, and independent trading stations filled the remaining seats. What they all had in common was frustration with the Council's increasingly restrictive governance. The current system, Chen continued, is based on a simple premise. That order requires hierarchy, that peace requires submission to authority, and that progress requires central control. Humanity's experience suggests that all three of these assumptions are fundamentally flawed. She gestured, and a holographic display materialized above the tables, showing the galactic political map. But unlike the traditional representation with its clear boundaries and zones of control, this display showed something else entirely. Trade routes, communication networks, resource flows, and population movements. The galaxy as it actually worked rather than as it was officially organized. This is the real galaxy, Chen said. Not the neat boundaries and hierarchical structures the Council likes to pretend exist, but the actual network of relationships, dependencies, and interactions that make civilization possible. And what you'll notice is that the official political boundaries often bear little relationship to the actual patterns of cooperation and trade. Zilthra, whose species resembled tall, elegant birds, raised one of her forearms. Ambassador Chen, are you suggesting we simply ignore the existing governmental structures? I'm suggesting we acknowledge that they're already largely irrelevant, Chen replied. When was the last time the Council actually solved a problem, rather than simply regulating how others could solve it? When was the last time a Council directive actually improved life for ordinary citizens rather than simply protecting the interests of the most powerful member species? A murmur of agreement ran through the room. These weren't radical revolutionaries. They were practical administrators who had seen firsthand how Council bureaucracy slowed down essential services and strangled innovation. Humanity proposes what we call the cooperative network, Chen continued. Not a government in the traditional sense, but a framework for voluntary cooperation based on mutual benefit rather than imposed authority. The holographic display shifted to show a new model. Not a hierarchy, but a web, with connections forming and dissolving based on need, opportunity, and mutual agreement. The basic principles are simple, Chen explained. First, voluntary participation. No system, species, or organization is compelled to join or remain in the network. Second, mutual benefit. Every arrangement must provide clear advantages to all participants. Third, transparent governance. All network decisions are made openly, with full information available to all members. Fourth, technological sharing knowledge and innovation are shared freely among network members. And finally, collective security. An attack on one member is considered an attack on all. Admiral Kethvar leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued. How would this network handle disputes between members? Through mediation and arbitration, with the parties involved choosing their own mediators from a pool of qualified individuals, Chen replied. If mediation fails, members are free to end their association with each other or with the network entirely. The goal isn't to prevent all conflicts, but to ensure they're resolved without violence whenever possible. The room erupted in discussion as delegates began to grasp the implications. This wasn't just a political alternative, it was a completely different way of thinking about civilization itself. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, humanity's chief economist, stood to address the room. The economic advantages alone would be substantial, she said. Current council regulations impose an average overhead of 37% on all intersystem trade. The network would reduce that to less than 5% by eliminating redundant bureaucracy and streamlining dispute resolution. She gestured to her own holographic display, showing trade flow models. More importantly, the network would allow for rapid economic adjustment to changing conditions. When the Kepler mining disaster disrupted rare element supplies last year, it took the Council 6 months to approve emergency trade arrangements under the network. Model alternative supply chains could have been established within weeks. The delegate from New Ceres, a mining world that had suffered severely during those 6 months of bureaucratic delays, nodded vigorously. 30,000 miners were out of work because the Council couldn't approve a simple trade modification, he said. Under your proposed system, we could have negotiated directly with alternative suppliers. Exactly, Chen confirmed. The network prioritizes practical solutions over bureaucratic process. But not everyone was convinced. The vegan delegate, representing one of the more conservative member systems, raised a concern that was on many minds. This sounds ideal in theory, Ambassador Chen, but what prevents powerful members from dominating weaker ones? What stops humanity, with its advanced technology and growing influence, from becoming just another hegemonic power? It was a fair question, and Chen had been expecting it. Built-in limitations on power concentration, she replied. First, no single member can control more than 15% of network resources or votes. Second, any decision affecting a specific region must be approved by a majority of systems in that region, regardless of their overall network influence. Third, the network charter includes the explicit right of secession. Any member can leave at any time, with no penalties or restrictions. She paused, looking around the room at the various alien faces. But most importantly, the network only works if everyone benefits. The moment it becomes a tool for domination rather than cooperation, members will simply leave and form their own arrangements. The system is designed to be self-correcting. Admiral Keithvar stood, his imposing figure commanding attention. The Stellar Confederacy has been considering these proposals carefully, he announced. We are prepared to become founding members of the cooperative network, effective immediately. The room erupted. If the Confederacy joined with its 47 systems and substantial military forces, the network would instantly become a major player in galactic politics one by one. Other delegates began to stand. The Free Worlds Alliance, the Outer Rim Mining Consortium, the Independent Traders Union New Geneva, the Ceres Republic. Within an hour, the network had grown from a theoretical proposal to a coalition representing over 130 systems. As the initial excitement died down, Chen raised her hand for attention. There's one more thing you should know, she said. Tomorrow, humanity will formally announce our withdrawal from the Galactic Council. Not in anger, not as a protest, but simply because we've found a better way forward. The silence that followed was profound. Everyone in the room understood the implications. The galaxy's political landscape was about to change forever. The Council has had 10,000 years to prove that their way works, Chen concluded. It's time to try something new. As the delegates began to file out, making plans for the complex logistics of establishing an entirely new form of galactic civilization, Ambassador Chen allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Humanity had come to the stars seeking adventure, knowledge, and new frontiers. They'd found something better, the chance to help build a truly free galactic civilization. The best was yet to come. 6 months after humanity's dramatic withdrawal from the Galactic Council, the political landscape of the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. The emergency session of the Council had been extended indefinitely, with delegates from various species arguing, threatening, and pleading in equal measure as they watched their carefully constructed order crumble. High Counselor Vexthul stood before the Great Assembly, his forearms trembling with barely contained fury as he surveyed the increasingly empty chamber. What had once been a grand amphitheater filled, with representatives from over 300 species, now echoed with the voices of barely half that number. This is unacceptable, he thundered, his voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. The humans have violated every principle of galactic order. They've seduced our members with promises of economic advantage and technological sharing, undermining millions of years of evolutionary hierarchy. The irony was lost on him that he'd just admitted the Council's system was based on evolutionary hierarchy rather than justice or mutual benefit. But it wasn't lost on the remaining delegates. Ambassador Telquin of the crystalline hegemony, one of the few species older and more conservative than Vexthol's people, spoke with a voice like breaking glass. Perhaps the question we should be asking is why so many of our members found these promises attractive in the first place. The chamber fell silent. Telquin's species had been founding members of the Council, and her words carried enormous weight. For millennia, she continued, we have maintained order through control. We have preserved peace through suppression of conflict. We have managed resources through centralized authority. And what have we achieved? Stagnation, economic inequality, technological stagnation. A galaxy where innovation is suspicious and change is feared. Vexthol's tentacles writhed in agitation. You speak of change as if it were inherently good. Order requires consent, Telquin interrupted, a rare display of emotion from her normally serene species. And clearly, we have lost the consent of half the galaxy. Meanwhile, aboard the UES Defiant, Ambassador Chen was reviewing the weekly reports from network members with a mixture of satisfaction and amazement. The transformation had been faster and more comprehensive than even her most optimistic projections. Trade volume is up 400%, reported Dr. Okonkwo, her economic advisor. The elimination of Council regulatory overhead has freed up enormous amounts of resources for actual productive activity. More importantly, added Admiral Reyes, we're seeing innovation at a rate unprecedented in recorded galactic history. When species can freely share technology and ideas without bureaucratic interference, the results are remarkable. Chen nodded. As she scrolled through the specific examples, the vegan agricultural techniques combined with human automation had increased food production by 60% across 12 systems. Ethereal energy manipulation technology merged with human engineering had produced fusion reactors twice as efficient as anything previously developed. Zephyrian bioadaptation methods enhanced with human medical knowledge were allowing colonization of previously uninhabitable worlds. What about military developments? She asked. Even more impressive, Reyes replied, his expression growing serious. The Network Defense Force now includes ships and personnel from 47 different species, all using standardized communication protocols and combined tactical doctrines. We've essentially created the most effective military force in galactic history, and it's dedicated to defense rather than conquest. This was particularly important because the Council had not reacted peacefully to the network's formation. 3 separate incidents had tested the new alliance's resolve. In each case, the network's response had been swift, proportional, and effective. The message was clear. The network would defend itself, but it had no interest in conquering others. Speaking of defense, Chen said, what's the latest intelligence on Council military preparations? They're struggling, Reyes admitted with something approaching sympathy. Coordinating military action between species with fundamentally different strategic doctrines is proving almost impossible. The Draconians want to strike fast and hard. The Ethereals prefer long-term siege tactics, and most of the smaller members don't want to fight at all. And their economic situation? Dr. Okonkwo laughed, a sound with little humor in it. Catastrophic losing over 100 systems didn't just cost them territory. It cost them the most economically productive regions of the galaxy. Council tax revenues are down 70%, and their ability to maintain infrastructure is failing rapidly. Chen turned to the viewport, looking out at the bustling space around the Defiant network. Ships from dozens of different species moved in carefully choreographed patterns, transferring cargo, passengers, and information with an efficiency that would have been impossible under the old system. Any word from the remaining Council members about negotiations? Several, Reyes replied. Unofficial approaches, Mostly they want to discuss accommodation and mutual coexistence. Translation: they want to find a way to save face while acknowledging the new reality. And our response? The same as always. The network is open to anyone who accepts our principles. We're not interested in conquest, domination, or forcing anyone to join us. But we're also not interested in compromising those principles to make the Council feel better about their declining relevance. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the bridge. "Ambassador," came Commander Park's voice. "We're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. It's marked as a formal diplomatic overture." Chen exchanged glances with her advisors. After 6 months of denouncing the network as a dangerous rebellion, the Council was finally ready to talk. "Put it through to the main conference room," she ordered. Minutes later, Chen found herself facing a holographic representation of High Counselor Vexthul, flanked by representatives from the major remaining Council powers. The draconian delegate looked particularly uncomfortable, his species' warrior culture clearly struggling with the necessity of negotiating from a position of weakness. "Ambassador Chen," Vexthul began, his tone carefully neutral. "The Galactic Council wishes to discuss the possibility of accommodation between our respective governmental structures." Chen kept her expression diplomatic, but she could feel the satisfaction of her advisors around the table. This was capitulation dressed up as a negotiation. "The network is always interested in peaceful coexistence, High Counselor," she replied. "What did you have in mind?" "A sphere of influence arrangement," the draconian delegate interjected, his patience for diplomatic niceties clearly exhausted. "The Council maintains authority over its remaining members, the network governs its own territory, and we establish protocols for interaction between the two systems." It was a reasonable proposal, Chen admitted privately, but it missed the fundamental point. "With respect," she said aloud, "the network isn't a territory or a government in the traditional sense. We're a voluntary association based on mutual benefit and shared principles. Any species or system that wishes to join us is welcome, regardless of their current political affiliations. Similarly, any current network member is free to leave if they find the Council system more appealing." Vexthul's tentacles writhed in frustration. "You're asking us to compete for the loyalty of our own members." "We're not asking you to do anything," Chen replied calmly. "We're simply offering an alternative. If your members prefer the Council system, they'll stay. If they prefer the network approach, they're welcome to join us. The choice is theirs." The silence that followed was profound. Everyone in the room understood the implications in a free competition between the two systems, based solely on which one better served the interests of ordinary citizens. The outcome was already clear. The crystalline hegemony delegate spoke for the first time in the conversation. "Perhaps it is time for the Council to consider whether our current approach truly serves the galaxy's best interests." As the transmission ended, Chen turned to her advisors with a thoughtful expression. "They're not going to give up easily," Admiral Reyes observed. "No," Chen agreed, "but they're also not going to be able to stop what we've started. The galaxy has tasted freedom, and there's no going back." She looked out at the stars visible through the conference room's viewport and smiled. "Besides," she added, "we're not just offering them a choice between two governmental systems. We're offering them the chance to build something entirely new, something based on cooperation rather than domination, on mutual benefit rather than hierarchy, on innovation rather than stagnation. The best part," Dr. Okonkwo added with satisfaction, "is that it's working." Indeed, it was across the galaxy. Species that had been enemies for centuries were working together on joint projects. Technologies that had been hoarded by their creators were being freely shared and improved. Worlds that had struggled under Council bureaucracy were thriving under network cooperation. Humanity had come to the stars seeking adventure and discovery. They'd found something even better, the chance to help build a galactic civilization worthy of the name. The future had never looked brighter. The first annual network assembly was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of the rigid formality of the old Council chambers, the gathering took place on New Geneva, humanity's newest colony world, in a series of interconnected pavilions built specifically for the occasion. The architecture itself made a statement. open, accessible, with no elevated platforms or hierarchical seating arrangements. Ambassador Chen, now Director General of the Network Assembly, walked through the bustling central plaza, where delegates from over 200 species mingled freely. The sight never failed to amaze her crystalline. Hegemony engineers discussed fusion reactor improvements with human scientists. Ethereal philosophers debated ethics with Zephyrian bioethicists. Draconian military officers shared tactical innovations with Stellar Confederacy fleet commanders. Was what galactic civilization should have been all along. Director General, came a familiar voice behind her. She turned to see Admiral Kethvar approaching, his usual military bearing softened by what passed for a smile among his species. Admiral, she replied warmly, how are the infrastructure development projects proceeding? Ahead of schedule and under budget, he reported with satisfaction. The joint Human Confederacy shipyards will be operational within 6 months. Combined with the ethereal energy systems and Zephyrian biological components, we'll have the most advanced spacecraft construction facilities in the galaxy. It was a perfect example of how the network functioned. Instead of one species hoarding technological advantages, everyone contributed their best innovations to shared projects. The result was progress at a rate that would have been impossible under the old system. Any word from the Council? Chen asked. Kethvar's expression grew more serious. They're struggling. 3 more systems joined the network this month, bringing our total to 247. The Council is down to less than 60 members, and most of those are the founding species who are too proud to admit the old system has failed. Chen felt a moment of sympathy for them, but it was tempered by the memory of their years of obstruction and bureaucratic oppression. Change was never easy, especially for those who had benefited from the old ways. Are they still issuing ultimatums? Officially, yes. Unofficially, High Counselor Vexthul sent a private message asking about the possibility of gradual integration into the network structure. Chen raised an eyebrow. That was news. Gradual integration? Apparently they want to join the network without admitting that the council system was flawed, Kethvar explained with amusement. They're proposing to maintain the council as a cultural preservation body, while adopting network principles for practical governance. It was a face-saving measure, but Chen had to admit it was probably the best outcome they could hope for. The important thing was results, not vindication. What's your assessment? I think we should encourage it, Kethvar said. The galaxy benefits more from their participation than from their continued isolation. And honestly, some of the older species have valuable perspectives that we shouldn't ignore. Chen nodded. It was the kind of pragmatic wisdom that made the network function unlike the old council, which had been obsessed with maintaining authority and protocol. The network focused on practical solutions and mutual benefit. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent chime from Chen's communicator. The image of Dr. Okonkwo appeared on the small screen, her expression excited. Director General, you need to see the latest economic reports. We've achieved something unprecedented. Minutes later, Chen and Kethvar were in the Assembly's main data center, looking at holographic displays that showed the galaxy's economic activity in real time. Pointer. The first time in recorded galactic history, Dr. Okonkwo explained, we've achieved full employment across all network systems. Not just employment, meaningful, productive work that contributes to everyone's well-being. The implications were staggering. Poverty had been a constant throughout. Galactic civilization, accepted as an inevitable consequence of limited resources and economic competition. But the network's cooperative approach had changed that fundamental equation. How? Chen asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Efficiency, Dr. Okonkwo replied simply. When you eliminate the overhead of maintaining hierarchical control systems, when you share technology freely instead of hoarding it, when you focus on solving problems instead of protecting established interests, it turns out the galaxy has more than enough resources for everyone. Admiral Reyes appeared on the screen from his flagship in orbit. Director General, you should know that we're receiving applications for network membership from systems throughout the galaxy. Not just individual worlds, but entire sectors. The Free Rim colonies want to join as a bloc. So does the Perseus Spiral Alliance. Chen felt a moment of vertigo. The network had grown beyond anything they'd originally imagined. What had started as humanity's frustrated response to council bureaucracy had become a fundamental transformation of galactic civilization. Are we prepared for this kind of expansion? More prepared than you might think, Admiral Reyes replied. The network's distributed structure scales naturally. Unlike the old council system, which became more cumbersome as it grew larger, the network actually becomes more efficient and resilient with each new member. It made sense. Chen realized a web of voluntary associations could grow indefinitely, while a hierarchical pyramid eventually collapsed under its own weight. There's something else, Dr. Okonkwo added, her voice taking on a tone of wonder. We're seeing the emergence of entirely new forms of cooperation. Species that have never interacted before are finding ways to combine their unique capabilities. The results are extraordinary. She gestured to a new display showing recent innovations. Crystalline data storage combined with ethereal energy patterns and human quantum computing has produced information systems that are essentially unlimited in capacity, and processing speed Zephyrian biological adaptation merged with draconian military doctrine, and human strategic thinking has created defense systems that are both incredibly effective and completely non-aggressive. Non-aggressive? Chen asked. The systems are designed to neutralize threats without causing permanent damage, Admiral Reyes explained. Instead of destroying attacking ships, they disable them and offer immediate humanitarian aid to the crews. It's proven remarkably effective at ending conflicts before they begin. Chen shook her head in amazement. Only in the network would military innovation focus on reducing casualties rather than increasing them. Director General, came another voice from the communication system. We have a priority message from Earth. Chen's expression grew more serious. Earth had remained officially neutral in the Network Council divide, though they had quietly supported the network's formation. As humanity's homeworld, their position carried enormous symbolic weight. Put it through, the image of President Martinez appeared on the main screen. Her expression grave but determined. Director General Chen, she began formally. After extensive deliberation, the United Earth government has reached a decision regarding our relationship with both the Galactic Council and the network. Chen held her breath. Earth support would legitimize the network in the eyes of many species who still viewed it as a human-dominated organization. Effective immediately, Earth is withdrawing from the Galactic Council and applying for full membership in the network. We believe that humanity's future, and the galaxy's future, lies in cooperation rather than domination, in innovation rather than stagnation. The communication center erupted in cheers from the staff, but Chen felt only a profound sense of responsibility. With Earth's membership, the network would represent the clear majority of galactic civilization. They were no longer an alternative. To the established order, they were the established order. There's more. President Martinez continued. We've been in communication with several of the remaining council holdouts. The crystalline hegemony has agreed to join the network while maintaining the council as a cultural and historical preservation society. The Draconian Empire is considering a similar arrangement. Even High Counselor Vexithol's people are beginning internal debates about membership. Chen felt a complex mix of emotions. Victory, certainly, but also the weight of unprecedented responsibility. The network now faced the challenge that had ultimately defeated the council. How to govern a galactic civilization without losing the principles that made good governance possible. Dr. Okonkwo, she said, turning to her economic advisor. I want projections for full galactic integration. What happens if every inhabited system in the galaxy joins the network? I've been working on exactly that scenario, Dr. Okonkwo replied, pulling up a new set of displays. The numbers are almost unbelievable. With full resource sharing and technological cooperation, we could eliminate scarcity entirely within a generation. Not just for basic necessities, but for everything that makes life worth living. Education, art, exploration, scientific research. More importantly, Admiral Kethvar added, we could begin expanding beyond this galaxy. The combined knowledge and resources of every species in known space would make intergalactic exploration not just possible, but inevitable. The idea was breathtaking. Humanity had dreamed of reaching the stars, and they dreamed of building a galactic civilization, and they'd done that too. Now they were facing the possibility of reaching beyond their own galaxy to touch the infinite cosmos beyond. "There's a philosophical question we need to address," came a new voice from the communication system ambassador. Telkine of the crystalline hegemony had joined the conversation, her ancient species perspective adding weight to her words. "The network has succeeded because it remained true to its founding principles," she continued. "But success brings its own challenges. How do we ensure that we don't become what the Council became, a bureaucratic system more concerned with maintaining power than serving its members?" It was the critical question, and Chen had been thinking about it for months. "The same way we've succeeded so far," she replied. "By building safeguards into the system itself, the right of secession remains absolute. No single species or region can control more than 15% of network resources. All decisions must benefit the majority of members, not just the most powerful ones. And most importantly, we must never forget that the network exists to serve its members, not the other way around." "There's one more safeguard," Admiral Reyes added from orbit: competition. "If the network ever becomes oppressive or ineffective, its members are free to leave and form alternative associations. The system only works as long as it remains the best option available." Chen nodded. It was the fundamental difference between the network and every previous galactic government. Instead of demanding loyalty and obedience, the network had to earn continued support through results. "So what's our next step?" she asked the assembled advisors and allies. "We keep doing what we've been doing," Kethavar replied simply. "We solve problems, we share innovations, we help our members thrive. We remain true to our principles, and we prepare for the incredible future we're building together." Chen looked around the data center at the faces of beings from dozens of different species, all working together toward common goals. It was everything humanity had hoped to find among the stars: friendship, cooperation, and unlimited potential for growth and discovery. "Then let's get back to work," she said with a smile. "We have a galaxy to finish building." As the various communications ended and the advisors returned to their duties, Chen remained in the data center for a few more minutes, watching the real-time displays that showed the network's activities across hundreds of star systems, ships moving between worlds in peaceful commerce, scientists collaborating on projects that would have been impossible just 2 years ago, families relocating to new homes on distant worlds, confident that they would find welcome and opportunity wherever they went. It wasn't perfect. No system created by imperfect beings could be, but it was working, growing, and improving with each passing day. More importantly, it was based on hope, rather than fear, cooperation rather than competition, and trust rather than control. Humanity had come to the galaxy as newcomers, eager to learn from older and wiser species. Instead, they'd taught the galaxy something it had forgotten: that civilization worked best when it was built on freedom, mutual respect, and the simple recognition that everyone deserved a chance to thrive. The stars had always been humanity's destination, but it turned out that the real journey was helping everyone reach them together. As Chen finally left the data center and walked back into the bustling plaza where delegates from across the galaxy continued their work of building a better future, she allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. They'd done it against all odds, despite the opposition of entrenched interests and ancient prejudices. They'd built something new and wonderful. Not just a government or an alliance, but a genuine community that spanned the stars. The best was yet to come. And for the first time in galactic history, everyone was invited to be part of it. "Grandma," Sarah asked, looking up at the towering spires that had once symbolized galactic authority, "what was it really like, being there when everything changed?" Chen smiled, remembering the fear, excitement, and determination that had driven those early days. "Terrifying," she admitted. "We had no idea if what we were proposing would work. We just knew that what existed wasn't working anymore. They paused before a display showing the old council chamber in its heyday. Hundreds of delegates arranged in rigid hierarchy, with the most powerful species elevated above the rest. It looked so cold, Sarah observed. It was, Chen confirmed. Everything was about protocol, precedence, and maintaining order. There was no room for innovation, no tolerance for dissent, no recognition that different species might have different needs and different solutions. They moved to the next exhibit, which showed the network's first assembly on New Geneva. The contrast was stark. Delegates mingled freely, species barriers, forgotten in the pursuit of common goals, and now, Sarah asked. Chen gestured toward the viewing portal, where they could see the bustling space traffic around the museum station. Ships from hundreds of different species moved in careful choreography, carrying goods, passengers, and ideas across the galaxy. Now we have something unprecedented in galactic history, Chen said. A civilization based on choice rather than compulsion, cooperation rather than domination, innovation rather than stagnation. But it almost didn't happen, Sarah said, having studied the history intensively. If humanity hadn't walked away from the talks, if humanity hadn't been willing to take a stand, Chen corrected gently. It wasn't just about walking away. It was about offering something better. They continued through the museum, past displays showing the network's growth, the technological innovations that had transformed galactic civilization, and the cultural renaissance that had followed the breakdown of species barriers. "Grandma," Sarah said as they reached the final exhibit, "do you think we made the right choice?" Chen looked at her granddaughter, brilliant, curious, idealistic, and preparing to spend her life helping maintain the civilization they'd built, and felt a profound sense of contentment. "Look around you," she said simply. "Poverty is extinct. War is almost unknown. Scientific advancement is accelerating at an unprecedented rate. Species that were enemies for millennia are now partners in building something wonderful. Art, literature, music, and philosophy are flourishing as different cultures learn from each other." She paused, looking out at the stars visible through the museum's transparent dome. "But most importantly," she continued, "every being in the galaxy has the freedom to choose their own path, to pursue their own dreams, to contribute their unique gifts to our shared future. That's what we fought for. That's what we achieved." Sarah nodded, understanding, dawning in her young face. "Your generation will face different challenges," Chen added. "The network is expanding beyond our galaxy now. We're making contact with civilizations in Andromeda and the Magellanic Clouds. The principles that built our civilization will be tested on an even larger scale." "Are you worried?" Sarah asked. Chen smiled, thinking of all the impossible things they'd already achieved. "No," she said confidently, "because the network isn't just a political system or an economic arrangement. It's a way of thinking, a commitment to the idea that cooperation is stronger than competition, that diversity is more valuable than uniformity, and that freedom is more powerful than control." "And that's enough?" "It's everything," Chen replied. "Those principles transformed our galaxy from a collection of competing empires into a genuine community. They'll work just as well on an intergalactic scale." As they prepared to leave the museum, Sarah asked, "One final question. What do you think humanity's real contribution to the galaxy was?" Chen considered the question carefully. It wasn't the technology, impressive as that had been. It wasn't the military innovations, crucial as they'd proven. It wasn't even the economic systems that had eliminated scarcity. "Hope," she said finally. For 10,000 years, galactic civilization had accepted that conflict was inevitable, that scarcity was permanent, that progress was impossible. Humanity refused to accept those limitations. We showed the galaxy that things could be different, that everyone could thrive, that the future could be better than the past. And now, Chen looked out at the stars, visible beyond the museum's dome, and smiled. "Now the galaxy is teaching us that lesson. Every day, every new innovation, every problem solved through cooperation instead of conflict, it all proves that our optimism was justified. The future isn't just better than the past. It's better than we ever dared to dream. As grandmother and granddaughter left the museum together, the lights of 1,000 worlds twinkled in the darkness, each one representing countless beings living in freedom, prosperity, and peace. Humanity had reached for the stars and found them full of friends it was, Chen reflected with deep satisfaction. The best possible outcome.